The Armed Occupation Act ratified by the U.S. Congress in 1842 stated, "Any settler who came to Florida, lived on the land for 5 years, cultivated 5 acres, and built a dwelling would be granted 160 acres."
They offered you 160 acres of land, food and ammunition, if you would come to Florida and you would live here for 5 years, clear and farm 5 acres, and build a dwelling. Okay, they never got the food or ammunition, but they did get the 160 acres.
John May bought that land, the land on which Brooksville, Florida stands today, from Richard Wiggins in 1855. It was then that, being a contractor by profession, he built several homes in the area, including a 4-room, 2-story dwelling for his wife Morena and their little girl Matildas. Not long after, Morena gave birth to another little girl, Annie, and 3 years later, in 1858, John was dead of consumption, leaving Morena to care for the children and to run the plantation on her own. It wasn't until 8 years later, on December 25, 1866, when Morena married Frank Saxon, a Confederate war hero after having been held prisoner by the Union Army during the Civil War, that she would come to bear 2 more children. A boy, Franklin Schmidt Saxon, was born in 1867, and sadly, having been born sickly, lived only 3 weeks. 2 years later, Morena gave birth to another baby girl, Jessie May Saxon, in 1869. During Jessie's birth, however, Morena became stricken with childbed fever. She died 3 weeks later. And poor Jessie, though her cause of death is unknown, lived only until 1872. She was 3. The only photograph of the child still hangs next to the original parlor fireplace, where she remains laid out for her funeral. Frank Saxon left the home after Jessie's death, remarrying to Tallulah Hope and building what would become known as the Scarborough House. Though transaction records were lost in the Brooksville Courthouse fire of 1877, it is believed that the house sold several times after Frank Saxon left. The first records after the fire are dated 1883, when J.H. Reddit sold the then so-called May Saxon house to a Jenny Johnson. And by 1903, the house, after his own home burned to the ground, was purchased by a Dr. Sheldon Stringer. It was during his time that the home came to know 10 more rooms, the most extensive renovation to date. Now, the May Stringer house, Dr. Stringer lived with his family, his wife and 3 children, and practiced medicine out of a first-floor office. Though no evidence solidifies the fact, some say the attic of the home then became a haven to yellow fever victims, calling on Dr. Stringer for treatment. May Stringer House remained in the Stringer family through 3 generations until 1949, the last member of the family to live in the home being Betty Stringer Faircloth, Dr. Stringer's granddaughter, and became a single-family rental home until 1974, when it was abandoned for 6 years until 1980. The house was then purchased by Dr. Earl Hensley and his wife Helen in October of that year and eventually leased to the Hernando County Historical Museum Association with an option to buy. The May Stringer House was purchased by the Historical Association in 1981 to become the May Stringer House Museum, and 1997 marked the structure's induction into the National Register of Historic Places. The structure today is a weathered 14-room, 7-gabled Victorian house with gingerbread trim. It stands 4 stories tall, has ceilings 10 feet high, and is furnished with period items donated by families from across Hernando County in an attempt to keep the era alive for future generations. Few of these items are original to the home, but may have added more than just aesthetic appeal. According to several volunteers of the May Stringer, these objects hold energy, binding more than a few spirits within the walls of the old house, many of whom aren't original to the home either.
Permanent residents, or those who choose to be permanent, there's about 9. Men, women, and children. Some are here because they lived here at one time. Some are here because they're attached to certain artifacts in the museum. And some are here just because.
At the time when we first started, and we were sanding floors and things like that, before it was even open to the public, we would hear a little girl saying, "Mama, Mama, Mama," and frightened many people away and wouldn't come back. And one of the men sanding the floor was a police officer, and he was in the doctor's room, and he went up to the second floor trying to find this.
She was born in this house and she died in this house at the age of 3. So her only reality was this house. She was born here, she died here. I think she's still here because she doesn't realize that there's any other place to be. And she's kind of waiting for mommy. And people tell us that there's a child crying in the museum in the middle of the night. They criticize us because there's a little girl running around out on the grounds when they drive by and the museum is closed. We have no control over this, but she's just a sweet little girl. But she's the most famous.
We had done the little tour prior to investigating, and one of the gentlemen, who was quite a big burly man, who didn't look like the type that would be spooked by very much or really even buy into it very much, he had his belt loop pulled on. So we were asking later that night, Jesse, was that you? Who was that? We were going on and on. And we got that it was Franklin. And we got an EVP that said, please don't tell.
I think the most haunted objects in the world are children's toys, especially dolls. Because little girls, especially 150 years ago, would have one toy, one dolly. It might even just be a rag doll, but it would be. But think of all the love and attention that went into this object. And I can tell you that up in Jesse's room, there are a couple of babies up there that they're haunted, definitely haunted. There's a little 6-year-old girl that hangs out right around that cradle all the time because one of her babies is in there. Probably the only baby she ever had.
And we did some EVP sessions in the dining room, and we felt we were very clearly talking to John May. And we got some answers to some questions because we've heard that there's that he may be buried on the property, someone may be buried on the property, and though not in a marked grave.
Some of the volunteers here have had an experience that could be her. We had one new volunteer, her very first day of being at the May Stringer house. She's driving in her car. She pulls in front of the museum. She looks on the second floor porch, and standing on the porch is a very nice young lady with brown hair in a bun and a long brown gown, and she waved to her and smiled. I think it was Morena, and she was very much the lady of the house here. So she helped build this house, and she died in this house. Her imprint is definitely here. I just don't know to what extent, and I have never had an interaction with her. I think a lot of hers is what I call snapshots. It's an incident that happened, and she relives it over and over. What I think is Frank Saxon up on the second floor porch in the old portion of the house. We captured him on the very first investigation 11 and a half years ago, and we captured him again 2 months ago. Same guy, second floor porch.
And we've also gotten Frank at the Saxon. We've investigated the Saxon house as
Okay.
well. So we've gotten
So
Frank
he's back and
both
forth.
places. Yeah.
So-
We feel he's more comfortable at the May Stringer, which is odd because the Saxon house was really his
Yeah.
baby.
I've seen him, and he is not very interactive. However, one day I started up the vacuum cleaner in the doctor's office, and this man yelled in my ear. And he said, "Hey!" And then the words infernal contraption just popped into my head. I'm like, okay, I won't vacuum. I found an obituary for a young war hero in 1919 in the Tampa Tribune that said he died suddenly in Brooksville, but did not say exactly where or how. And I believe that back then they respected people's privacy. So for his sake and for the Stringer family's sake, they did not name names or say suicide in their house. I mean, that would, be ruinous for them. So I think that was him. I think that obituary was his. And we gave him the name James, but that is not his real name. He's here because he committed what he felt was the ultimate sin, which was suicide. He arrived about 9.5 years ago with the donation of an actor's trunk. This trunk was built in 1885. We have found catalog advertisements for this particular trunk. It started with a black mass that was raging around, and I was having issues with it. It made me kind of feel sick. I got smacked a couple times, and there was no one there.
The May Stringer house has been investigated by 67 paranormal teams over the last 11 years. 46 of these have certified the structure haunted, making it one of the top 10 most haunted locations across the state of Florida.
The entities that reside in this house, and there's a lot of coming and going. This is like Grand Central Station, and in these older homes, if you stop and think about it, even the physics of the situation, which is energy, your soul, your being, what makes you alive is energy, pure energy. And physics will tell you can't destroy energy. You can transfer it, you can push it around, you can do a lot of things, but you can't destroy it.
Weekly day tours are held, giving visitors the opportunity to learn about the history of the home, while nightly ghost tours allow professional and novice ghost hunters the opportunity to experience the entities looming about the rooms of the old house.
If spirit wants to do something, they will do it. And they don't care if it's daytime, nighttime, if you got a group of tourists in here, if you got paranormal investigators, if you got mediums, they don't care. If they're gonna do what they're gonna do, if you're afraid of the paranormal, don't come here. That's just silly. Because it's gonna happen.
Whether a believer in the paranormal or not, one thing is certain. The history contained within the walls of the May Stringer Museum will not long be forgotten, if not by the visitors of the home, then by the spirits of those who came before them.